Okay, so the first presentation we have is from Sean. He's going to be talking about the use of immersive learning using 360 virtual reality. So we're going to talk to Sean, who's going to talk about use of immersive 360 video in learning. This is a project I'm close to my heart, so we work very closely on. And I'll hand over to Sean now.
Well, thank you. Can you hear that? Is that all right? I'm working under the assumption the first person that goes can completely bomb it because it can only just improve over the rest of the day. So that's what I'm very grateful for. I think it's. I wanted to start off by giving. Is that okay? I want to start off by giving you a bit of history about myself because I think it is actually very, very relevant. I've been nursing for 27 years in neurosurgery, emergency care. My colleagues who are in the room right now who know this, I've worked in America as well and worked in healthcare improvement and education. I've been at Lincoln for 7 years. I've got a degree in nursing and I've got a master's degree in organizational management. I'm putting those up there not because I want to brag about it, but actually because I think it gives a bit of context to where we're coming from. And just a little bit of, there is some technology in here. Some of you may or may not recognize that. That's a Scion 3A. I did my dissertation on that for my bachelor's degree, and I think I had 256K of memory on it, so very, very little. So that's some of my technology. So what don't I know? That's a Commodore 64 as well, for anybody that recognizes that. I have one of those. What don't I know? I recently bought a 4K TV. I'm not entirely sure what 4K means, but it looked good, so I've got that. I don't know anything about gaming. I don't even know what HTML is. And I've seen this word C++ written every now and then, and I have no idea what that means. So I have no computer experience. I've self-taught myself, and I can embed video in Blackboard. So I have a very, very limited perspective, I suppose, on digital learning. But what I do know is I've been involved in VR for many, many years. Now, I'm going to look around and see people's faces as they start to go, oh, yeah. I've been involved in VR for very, very many, many years. For those that are too young, that's a ViewMaster. You put a little card in the top, you rotated it around, you looked at pictures of the Grand Canyon. So it's great stuff. And I think just reiterating what Andy just said there is just picking up on why is all of this important. We saw and I think the eminent decline of it, Google Glass in about 2013, and then it sort of has faded away, I think, a little bit. But what we have seen is 2016, there was the Pokemon Go craze. Anybody involved in that? No, you're not going to admit it, are you? Okay, some of you will. But the Pokemon Go craze, augmented reality, and then virtual reality, the Samsung Gear, Oculus Rift, and then colleagues over there that are in computer sciences. And I think a lot of people, how many of you have received a free headset with a phone? Some of you have. So you've received it, so they give them away as gimmicks. So there's something there. And what we asked ourselves last year was, could this technology be applied to healthcare education? And I know some of these challenges are no different to what anybody else has. We have large cohort numbers in excess of 200. We are a practical it's a practical skill-based course, and it's very intensive. Our program, 50% of it is delivered in clinical areas. So I don't know if all my other colleagues are aware of that, but 50% of the time our students will go out to clinical settings to do their practice. The other 50% is spent here in the university with us. So our dilemma then, I think we were facing, was in a recent analysis that we've done around some research that we did with Andy around this video, was students have actually rated lectures as being least favorite. I'm not entirely, does that come as a surprise to anybody? Probably not. They rate those quite not very high. For us, they rated clinically based learning as the highest. So they preferred to be out in practice. But actually that's really quite impractical because 50% of it has to be delivered in the university. But they rated e-learning and sort of technology-based learning somewhere in the middle. And what we wanted to do was look at how we could bridge this practice theory gap. So how we could bring those together and make them a lot better. So last year, you've got to kind of look at the lettering up there. I have a Let's Just Do It colleague, and I don't know if, I haven't seen Trevor yet, but Trevor Simpson is a colleague of mine. He's the type of person that I'll just say, should we give it a try? And he's, yeah, let's just do it. So we had an idea last year of looking at AR, augmented reality, so hence the highlighted bits on there. We discussed ideas around using AR for enhancing student learning. We met with our newly appointed digital team at the time, and discussed our ideas for AR, and we felt it was a really, really good idea. We had the tech, let's use it. But lesson one we learned was focus on the output, not the input. You know, we learned very quickly not to focus on the technology and focus on what we actually wanted to achieve. And the pedagogy was really important and not the technology. So then we actually very, very slightly changed that. If you look, the A has moved to a V, and it became a very good idea, and we decided that VR was probably a better route to go down. And the big challenge for me was actually, I think I got dragged kicking and screaming, because I had the equipment that I desperately wanted to use, and was persuaded otherwise that actually don't use that equipment, use another source to create what we're trying to create. And we were then directed to focus on the pedagogy. I think it's very easy to say that actually sometimes we'll just buy equipment and cameras and go, oh, we'll use these, rather than thinking, well, how are we going to use them? We also wanted to focus on the student experience. What are they experiencing with VR technology, and how can we embed that in our program? And then how to apply it, and then the inevitable question of what next? Where do we go from here? As you'll see behind, I'm placed on this section just here, but just across the way there, it's really, really quite high-tech and expensive stuff. Is that our next stage? I don't know. So lesson 2 then, for those of you that remember, that's the Mr. Bean set where he tried to defibrillate somebody using a lamppost. We wanted to create learning resources using technology, not using technology to create learning outputs. And that's the sort of focus we started to look at, using the learning resources and what technology can we apply to that. So that was lesson 2. We wanted to focus on the learning resources. What can we create? Again, those of you that are probably old enough, that's Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And so we were able to create things like a clinically based scenario with a poor clinician attitude. So we had that in there. We were able to replicate that. Can't really do that on a ward because it's unethical. We wanted to demonstrate poor communication, poor confidentiality, and observable objects. And then sort of saying, is this pedagogical? Is there pedagogical stuff in there that the student can come away and go, oh yeah, I get that. Now what do I need to do differently? So some of the stuff in there that we've sort of applied that we want our students to learn, and I hope colleagues that are not in health and social care can also see how this can apply to them, is what is it you want them to observe and what is it you want them to learn from? And again, that's a scene from Psycho. And one of the big things we put in there was we had curtains. And for our students, and if anybody's been in hospital and you've come across curtains, there's a perception that actually the curtains drown out the noise and keep it very, very quiet and other people can't hear. Actually, curtains don't hide anything. So that was something we had in there that we wanted the student to observe. We had elements of body language in there. How did the person respond to certain people? And if you want to view that video, we will have the video playing over there. So you're more than welcome to watch that and see what we're talking about. We then had inappropriate actions from the nurse, from some of the charts where they were placed, and the curtains, as I've said. And some of the pedagogy was we wanted to have lots and lots and lots of observable objects. And it's actually going, well, actually, in a 2-minute video, you don't want too many observable objects. We wanted to keep it to a real minimum, so we kept it to about 4 or 5, but with a really, really good learning outcome. Now the technology. I'm very aware that we have our colleagues over there that got a really expensive kit, but actually I wanted to look at it purely from my perspective. I told you about my background and my courses and what I've done. And it's to point out that I have absolutely no technology, computer, VR, videography experience whatsoever. And I wanted it to be a thing that actually can say to colleagues who are probably like-minded, actually with the right equipment, which is relatively cheap, we can actually do the same thing with the resources we've got. So we wanted off-the-shelf resources. The camera we've got was, I think it's gone down in price, but it was about 499 quid. So not really that expensive as a camera. We wanted to work out where the location of resources could be put. So we didn't want you have to go out and buy extra software to do that. So we've gone for YouTube. YouTube does a lot of the work for you. If you join us later on, you'll find out. It just does all the work for you. And then different formats for the resources. Do we want it to be VR or not? And some of the things we've learned were that VR works for some people, but I found out the other day that a student said to me she can't participate in our research that we're doing because she's got monocular vision and she can't use it. And I said, well, that's actually the reason why you do need to be involved in the research, to tell us you can't watch it because it doesn't work for you. So what other formats do we need to have to make sure that works? And then it needs to be reproducible. It's all very well having one video. I think the starting up of this thing started when my boss said to me, how many of these videos have we produced? And I stood there and was counting them in my head, and it was one. So actually, we've got to have more of them to keep the student engaged and know that they're available for us. So that's the technology. That's what we were looking at. And all of our kit over there comes to under £1,000. So really not that expensive to create something that's probably really a really good learning resource. Okay, so final consideration. What we want to ask, and we're doing a piece of research, is actually, is VR, virtual reality, as a teaching tool worth the time and energy? Because it does take a bit of time to do that. Is it worthwhile or not? If it is, can it be used as a resource in a truly flipped classroom environment? And I know a colleague of mine is talking about the flipped classroom in a minute. But one of the challenges we have with our students is our students, we tend to have, I think, a maturer, when I say mature, I mean an older, maturer student that maybe have families and live away from Lincoln or outside of Lincoln, outside the city. So coming in for things is probably a lot more challenging for them, probably. So could we use VR and then use something like, say, Blackboard Collaborate to then discuss what was found out in that video with them? Then we wanted to ask ourselves, if it is useful, how easy is it for students to access and use this resource at home? Again, you've got, I don't know how much John's kit over there costs, but I'm sure it's a heck of a lot of money. But you come back and work out actually what resources does this student need. And we've got some examples of what we've got over there, but you've got the simple Google card that you can buy for a couple of pounds. Most students have already got a smartphone, although that's not entirely something you can rely on. I got, over the summer, I got a new Sony Xperia. It's a middle-of-the-range smartphone. Was quite impressed with that. But actually, this doesn't possess any gyroscopes or anything. So actually, I can't watch VR on this. So actually, it's not even the expense. So making sure the student has the resources by which they can watch that video. And then I think our final thing is what next? Where do we go from here? So I have colleagues here today from a colleague in the back and a colleague from OT and a colleague from nursing and social work and healthcare. What can we do next? What are the next things we can create? And we're looking at creating a raft of other ones to show a patient journey, for example, and use those. That's it. So thank you for listening.